Welcome back to Faces 8 on this Sunday morning. With us now to talk about tolls, two state representatives. We have Cara Pavalock-D'Amato, she's a Republican, and Jason Doucette, he is a Democrat. We thank you both for being in the program today. And I'll begin with you, Representative Pavalock-D'Amato. How do you feel about tolls and what you just listened to?
I'd have to agree with actually both of the gentlemen. At some point, my constituents are very much against tolls. 50% of all Bristol commuters drive over 10 miles to work every day. So they feel that this is just another tax on the working class. And
how about you, Representative Doucette? You represent Manchester?
That's right. Lots of commuters.
How do people there feel?
Lots of commuters. Well, I'm truly on the fence on it. I think we're waiting to see a lot of the details on this. I think there's a lot of common ground, and I think we both agree that there's possibly a compromise to be had between tolls and no tolls. The big issue for me is, as Representative Pavalock-D'Amato said, it really is affecting the working class. That's my and middle class taxpayers. That's a primary concern of mine. So I want to see a plan. If I'm not opposed to tolls in concept, but I want to see a plan that really addresses that and make sure that the impact on middle-class taxpayers is minimized as much as possible.
So you bring up an interesting possibility. We have the governor watching. We've got many of your colleagues watching. If you two came up with a compromise between no tolls and tolls, what would it be? I'll begin with you.
Again, you know, it's a pattern here. It is every year it's increased taxes, but then there's increased spending. So for me, it's really tough to compromise because based on, I think, the Democrats' history in this state, it starts off as a study, and then the next thing you know, it is not just 40 gantries, it's 82 gantries. It's you know, just this much as far as the amount would be to charge, and then all of a sudden, you know, it to cover our other expenses, they're increasing it. So,
could you support a system where there are some tolls?
You know, again, I have in Florida, they do have actually a pay lane, and down there, I think it's implemented very effectively. But again, up here, it's just, I don't trust the system. It's, again, always increasing and increasing. So up here, I just don't see it happening.
Representative Doucette, what would your compromise be?
So I think one thing we definitely all agree on is that we need to take inventory and determine what our needs are, the prioritized part of the prioritized progress plan, which we voted out last night in the Finance Committee, two bills. One is prioritized progress, and the other is Senator Fanfara, the Democratic chair of the committee, proposed a similar bill, which would establish a transportation board to really look at what our needs are. So I think we need to determine that first, and from there, we look at the pricing, the cost, and prioritizing those needs. One thing I will say is that simply bonding, as the earlier guest said, would put 100% on the taxpayers of Connecticut. So where we have an alternative that is not 100% on the taxpayers of Connecticut, I think we need to be very serious about looking at that.
How vocal are your constituents about tolls? Are they coming up to you in the supermarket? Are they emailing? Are they going on social media?
I get a lot social media, online, emails, but also we had a forum just a few weeks ago, and there were over 300 people there. And when we asked, even in the beginning and at the end, what do you think? Most hands going up were against tolls.
And what about you?
I think, honestly, we hear opinions on both sides of that. It's a hot issue. We hear
like 50-50?
I'd say it's close to 50-50, quite honestly, yes. And, you know, I campaigned in 2018, my first time running, spent a lot of time knocking on doors, talked to a lot of people on both sides of the issue, quite honestly. There are people who understand that we need to take care of our infrastructure, that we have great needs, and that tolls would be a solution that would put the burden on out-of-state drivers and commercial traffic. So on the other side, certainly there are people who are vocal against tolls.
Let's shift to the budget a little bit. What do you think about Governor Lamont's budget proposal as it stands?
Well, you know, I like the debt diet part of it. However, a lot of the other parts were more increased spending. Again, due to legislation we passed last year, we have to bail out Hartford, and that's costing $25–30 million a year of borrowing. Which the representative just mentioned, you know, they don't want to do. But again, in other places, it's increased borrowing, increased spending, and again, just falling on the shoulders of taxpayers.
Is bankruptcy better for Hartford, like they did in Detroit?
I'm actually a bankruptcy attorney, so I have read a few articles as far as how it has been done in other cities, and I think it's definitely an option that should be looked at. We should have a study for that, in fact.
Would that save taxpayers money? to let Hartford go bankrupt?
It may. But I think we just finished up the budget process this week in both the Appropriations Committee, which Representative Pavalock-D'Amato sits on, and the Finance Committee, which I sit on. And I was no fan of the governor's budget. I'm happy to say that in the Finance Committee, our revenue package avoided over 80% of the expansion of the sales tax base, which was proposed, which I saw as very regressive, again, affecting middle class and working class taxpayers the most. So I'm pleased about that. I think we did do some things additionally that will help. Again, tax exemptions for seniors are preserved in the budget that we passed. On the spending side, it's really a flat budget. A lot of the increased cost is due to debt service. We're paying down our debt. We're being responsible, but we're also addressing the needs of the most vulnerable populations in our state, which is what we have to do.
What about these new taxes, perhaps on Uber and Lyft and things like that, and some of the other sales tax increases?
Yeah, this budget is an additional $1 billion of spending, in addition to $2.5 billion in taxes, new taxes. And remember, we're going in with an over $1 billion deficit. So this is not a balanced budget. Again, it's increased spending all on the backs of our middle working class, everything from tolls to movies to additional food taxes. It's a lot.
And I'll let you have the final word on this. New taxes. Nobody wants to hear that.
Right, and like I said, I think we avoided the vast majority of what was proposed. I do agree that some of the tax base needs to be modernized, digital downloads and things like that probably make sense to look at. But I would agree that any tax that can be looked at regressive and is hitting the middle class the hardest is something to be avoided.
We thank you both for being with us. Jason Doucette, Cara Pavalock-D'Amato.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you have to get back to the Capitol. A lot of work to be done in the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much. When we come back, a Connecticut legend is with us. Jerry Franklin will look back at his legacy. And we welcome your comments on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook right now. And don't forget to take our tolls poll on the WFSB Facebook page.